I'm here with my homie Professor Asher, and I'm just gonna dive right into it, man. So I speak with people from a lot of different arenas, and everybody knows, there's the Paleo Hebrew, but then you have the Assyrian Hebrew, and there seems to be confusion between these two different scripts as if they're two different languages. So I just take a moment and walk us through that to jump this thing off,
All
will
right.
you?
So I love that you differentiated between the Hebrew script and the Hebrew language. There is a difference, right? And the reason why there were different scripts is actually the same for why English had different scripts, right? The English language has existed for quite some time. And if you look at earlier English writing, it's very different from the way that we write today. Huh? So in the 16th century, maybe, or even in the 17th century, when the King James Version of the Bible was written, you can look at the script, you can read it, sort of, but you know that that's not the way that we write and type today, right? It's a different script, but it's still the same language, all right? You can write in modern English in the earlier script, right? The difference in script does not change the meaning of the language, okay? The language evolves independently of its script. So, in terms of the Hebrew script, the script that most people are familiar with today is the Ashurit or the Assyrian script, right? This is the script that modern Israelis use to write the Hebrew language. And and it has been this case actually since even 300 years before the arrival of our Messiah. We can see that in the Dead Sea Scrolls, the scribes wrote in the Ashurit script, right? But obviously, that wasn't the script that was used hundreds of years prior. King David would not have written in the Ashurit script. And we know this because archaeology, we have dug up Hebrew inscriptions, and they were written in what is actually called the Phoenician script. You see, when we say Paleo-Hebrew, we are referring to that script which was used by the Israelites during that period of time. However, it was not invented by the Israelites. Neither did God drop it from the heavens. Long before the Israelites used the Paleo-Hebrew script, this same script was used by the Phoenicians. We have inscriptions from them whereby they used that script long before the Israelites adopted it. All right? So the story is that long before you had a written script, you first spoke the language. That's how almost all languages begin, right? You spoke the language, and now you want to write it down. So what do you have to do? You have to come up with a way to express the language in writing. And for the Israelites, what they did was essentially that they borrowed a script that already existed, and then they started writing their language in that script. Because conveniently, uh, both languages share many of the same sounds, right? And so the Israelites could adopt that script and write it. And so that script is what we call Paleo-Hebrew. But the Israelites themselves would not have thought that they were so intelligent as to come up with a new script. They didn't have to. If it ain't broke, you know, just adopt it. Yeah, yeah. So that's why there are different scripts. Now, after they were exiled into Babylon, right? They had to learn another language, Aramaic. And hey, conveniently, Aramaic had many of the same sounds as Hebrew. And now that they were in an Aramaic speaking world, and they were writing the Aramaic language in the Aramaic script, why not take that script and use it to write the Hebrew language. It makes sense. We did that for English. This English alphabet is not really an English alphabet, it was a Latin alphabet, right? The Latins came up with it. I mean, the Romans. The Romans were the original users of that alphabet, and the English speakers, the English language existed long before there were letters to write down the English language. And the English speakers said, you know, that Latin alphabet could represent many of the sounds that we already had. And since we are living under Roman rule, why not we just take the Latin alphabet and use it to write the English language? And ta-da! Today, we are writing English with a Latin alphabet. And this Latin alphabet is quite useful, isn't it? It's even used to write Spanish, Italian, German, many other languages. So that's how it came to be.
Okay. So to put it in layman's terms, you got the what we call Paleo-Hebrew, but the Paleo-Hebrew is really just a Phoenician language that the Israelites adopted and used because they had similar sounds in each language. But and so they started writing with the Paleo alphabet. However, when they went into Babylonian captivity, they adopted the Assyrian way of writing, so they wrote the same language in a different way. Is that right?
Sure. I mean, so first of all, just a note that if you reject the Assyrian script, then you have to reject the entire Dead Sea Scrolls, right? Because they wrote in the Assyrian script and at the same time the Paleo script. They did not see a contradiction, right? So that's just a note. Now, strangely enough, for if you want to learn the Paleo-Hebrew script, what we do have in Paleo-Hebrew are Canaanite language inscriptions, right? So, for example, the Hezekiah inscription, okay, this time written by Hebrew speakers, all right, in the same script. The Meshach stele, written by a Moabite in the Moabite language, but the letters are what we would call Paleo-Hebrew, wrongly called Paleo-Hebrew, right? They were writing their language in that script. So yes, archaeology has uncovered several inscriptions written in that script, which we call Paleo-Hebrew. Not only Israelites writing it, but even Canaanites writing in that same script.
Okay, so my question is, what do we have available to us? And I know the answer to this, but for the viewers, what do we have available to us to study that's in the Paleo script? Like if
Yeah,
somebody were to reject the Assyrian script because they don't want anything to do with the rabbis, they only want to read the Paleo Hebrew because the Paleo Hebrew is the real Hebrew. What could they actually study from the scriptures?
okay. So, we don't have any of the original manuscripts of the biblical books, right? So, we can't answer that with 100% certainty. But I will tell you that all of the full copies of any biblical book were written in the Assyrian script. Okay? Now, we do have fragments of biblical books written in Paleo-Hebrew in among the Dead Sea Scrolls, but they are fragments, right? We don't have a full copy, small fragments, never a full book written in Paleo-Hebrew, never, right? So yes, they might have written, but again, these are copies. These fragments, manuscripts written in Paleo-Hebrew are not the originals, they are copies. And you don't know whether this scribe copied a Paleo-Hebrew text or they had in front of them an Assyrian script text and they were just transcribing Aleph to Aleph, Bet to Bet, Gimel to Gimel. You don't know that. We don't know that, right? So again, a very short Bible study because seriously, the Jews before our time didn't think in the way that we do, as if the Paleo-Hebrew script is superior to the Assyrian script. They did not think like that.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is if somebody wanted to reject what they would call modern Hebrew, but it's really the Assyrian Hebrew script. And they only wanted to study the Paleo script. They would have an extremely short study. Is that right?
You cut off a bit there. So, but when we talk about the Hebrew language, right, the script is irrelevant. You could write in the Phoenician script and in the Assyrian script, and they would mean the same thing. I like to use this illustration. Maybe we can put this on in post production. I have an image where I write the Hebrew word telephone in in the Paleo-Hebrew script. Now, telephone is clearly a modern Hebrew word. It did not exist before the first millennia, right? Just because I wrote it in the Phoenician script, or sorry, just because I wrote it in the Paleo-Hebrew script does not make it automatically an ancient biblical word. It does not change the reality that the Messiah did not use this word, telephone, you know? So likewise, when I write a biblical Hebrew word or sentence in the Assyrian script, it does not automatically make it modern Hebrew, you know? So the script is really irrelevant.
Okay, so I mean, I'm taking biblical Hebrew, and I'm taking modern Hebrew. Um, where's the confusion? What's the difference between those two?
So the difference between biblical Hebrew and modern Hebrew is the vocabulary, grammar, and syntax, right? Not the script, all right? The difference that is more relatable to us would be the difference between modern English and Shakespeare's English. When Shakespeare speaks English, he says thou, thee, thine. We don't do that in modern English, but Shakespeare did when he spoke English during his time. All right? But over time, the English language changed. And so today we speak modern English. It's still the same language, but it has changed since the time of Shakespeare. Likewise, modern Hebrew that is spoken in Israel today is not the same as the Hebrew or the language that was spoken by the ancient Israelites and Jews. All right. There are many differences. I think we can go into that in detail some other time. All right. But the difference is in the way that the language is used and not in the script that it was written in.
Okay, would it be worth mentioning? I forget the guy's name, Elazar, and how in the 19th century he revived Hebrew as a spoken language and made it more modern, adding thousands of words to the Hebrew language. Dig into that a little bit.
Yeah, so Eliezer ben Yehuda, right? The reviver of Hebrew. So I think one thing to note again is that when he revived Hebrew, um, the revived and new Hebrew is not the same as the Hebrew that was spoken again during biblical times, right? He had to adapt it to the modern realities. So most of the new immigrants to the promised land were European in origin, right? So they came back and they started to use this new and revived Hebrew, and because of this, modern Hebrew actually more closely represents European languages more than they do biblical Hebrew. Let me give you an example, right? So in modern Hebrew, the yiktol form of verbs is equated to the future tense, all right? So in modern Hebrew, there is past tense, present tense, and future tense. However, in biblical Hebrew, there was no such concept of past, present, and future tense, right? The yiktol form was an imperfective aspect. So, an example I like to use is in Genesis chapter 2, where it says that a mist uh, used to rise up in the garden, right? Before any rain fell, a mist used to rise up. Verse 6, right? Genesis chapter 2, verse 6. Ve'ed ya'ale min ha'ares. Vehishqat vehishqa et kol pene ha'adama. Right? Ve'ed ya'ale. Now, if you let a modern Hebrew speaker read this text, and he doesn't have any background in the Bible, he would translate this as, and a mist will go up from the earth, right? Because he will equate ya'ale, that form, with the future tense. However, in biblical Hebrew, the yiktol form does not necessarily denote the future tense. The timing of a verb in biblical Hebrew can only be determined by context. And in context, this is talking about a past time. So a biblical Hebrew speaker would naturally read this, the ed ya'ale, as and a mist used to go up from the earth, right? He would not have thought of this as a future tense compared to a modern Israeli Hebrew speaker. So this is one of the examples that I used to demonstrate the difference between biblical Hebrew and modern Hebrew. Notice the script is irrelevant. Yeah.
Okay, and that's very, very good, because you pointed out something that a lot of people don't realize, which is, even if a modern Hebrew speaking person were to pick up a Bible, they have literal biblical translations from the biblical Hebrew to the modern Hebrew, the same way we would have an English translation from the biblical Hebrew to the English language. There's actually a translation for modern Hebrew speakers. They got their biblical Hebrew, which is translated into their modern Hebrew, so they can understand it better, because they're not the same, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. There are Bibles that modern Israelis use with the original Hebrew text on one side and then a modern Hebrew translation on the other. And this tells us very clearly that there is a difference between biblical Hebrew and modern Hebrew, such that the modern Israeli speaker needs a translation, you know? Yeah. And the script is the same. The script is irrelevant.
Right, right. Okay. So since we're here, we got the Hebrew pulled up. Talk to me a little bit about the vowels. We mentioned the Dead Sea Scrolls, how we can read through them. We got them. Do do they have vowels?
Okay, so the Dead Sea Scrolls would not have vowels written down. So that's the distinction, right? So many people say, oh, the original Hebrew did not have vowels. Wait, that's only half true. The full truth is that vowels did exist, it was just not represented in writing. And this is very common for Semitic languages. Semitic languages are a family of languages that originated in the Middle East. So Arabic, Aramaic, right? Canaanite languages, these are example of Semitic languages. And they did not have vowels represented in writing. But vowels did exist. Otherwise, you won't be able to vocalize the language, you know? Even the people who insist that vowels don't exist inevitably add vowels, right? Uh, every time they make an ah sound, Yahuwah, they say, that ah, ooh, ah sound, that's a vowel sound. You can't help it, right? So yes, the reason why vowels were not originally represented in Hebrew was because it was the common assumption that a native reader of a Hebrew text or any other Semitic language for that matter, they would know automatically what vowels to put in. They didn't need it represented in writing. But later on, when that became a problem, then vowel markings were added to manuscripts in order to make it clear what vowels should be read when that word is read.
Okay, so what you're telling me is there's absolutely no conspiracy behind the vowels being added by the Masoretes.
None. The only conspiracies that came up were in the 20th century. You know, or maybe if I'm conservative, I haven't seen any other conspiracies from an earlier time, but none of the original Hebrew speakers, for so many thousands of years, ever complained. In fact, they were happy for the introduction of vowels so that their language did not become unpronounceable. Egyptian had this problem. The Egyptian hieroglyphs did not have vowels represented, only consonants. And so today, the modern Egyptian, if they identify as that, they look at the hieroglyphs and say, yeah, I know the consonants, but I don't know the vowels. And they had to make it up. They had to make it up for many hundreds of years until modern Egyptologists figured out exactly which vowels went where. All right, but for hundreds of years before that, they just had to add, it was inevitable, they had to add vowels. So very fortunately, this did not happen to Hebrew. That's a good thing. Yeah.
Okay. So you're familiar with Tim Hegg, right? So Tim Hegg, he has this. I think it originated with him, but I'm going to quote him. He says, "Words don't have meaning, but meaning has words." That meaning, just because you know the language doesn't mean you know anything. You got to know the culture in order to understand what the author's saying, right?
Yes, I agree with that. Even when you look up a dictionary, the researchers behind the dictionary have figured out the meaning of the words by studying how the people thought about concepts and then applied words to them. You see? So you don't just say, oh, this word means this, and then therefore everywhere that you find that word, that is the meaning. That's not how languages work. Even the English language, it doesn't work like that. So why do we think that the Hebrew language breaks all the rules of normal language? When you read the Bible in Hebrew, we have to remember this was someone's language. Someone used this in the marketplace. The way that many people today think about Hebrew is like some kind of magical formula concoction, that is totally unserviceable as a proper language. And that is how we can know. Even if I don't know any Hebrew, the moment you treat Hebrew as some sort of mathematical formula or magical, that is how you know that theory is probably not true.
All right,
Yeah.
Professor Asher, man, I ain't gonna bother you no more with more questions, but just know I really appreciate you. I really appreciate you coming on. I really appreciate your heart to tell the truth, getting rid of myth information. Bow, I got to use it. Myth
That's
information. I
right.
love
Yeah.
it. So, you have any closing thoughts? Anything you want to say?
Yeah. So just to be clear, everything that I've said today, I know people might disagree, and we will have opportunities in the future in fuller episodes to explain each point in depth. All right. So I'm just giving you my view for now. I'm giving a very brief overview of the reality. But obviously there are pieces of evidence that we could show in fuller depth in future opportunities, right? We can't cover everything within a half an hour that we have allocated for the program. So yeah.
Another question.